Welcome to day 2 of the Strategic Conference at the Solar Show Philippines 2016. I would like to start the day with 3 bold statements. Number 1, solar together with storage is prompting an energy revolution ahead. Number 2, COP21 will require a complete transformation of what we have today, and that transformation needs to start now. And then finally 3, finance will play an important role for this imperative transformation towards a decarbonized future, since a good business case is a stronger driver than a climate change imperative. Decarbonizing means that just about everything will be electric in the future. This transformation will arguably be much easier to accomplish in areas like Southeast Asia than, for example, in Europe or the US with 100% electrification and the prevailing central generation approach. But yet, the energy trilemma of reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy is globally more prevalent than ever today, though with different challenges locally. In DNVGL, we see 4 main solutions or focus areas to help solving the energy trilemma while preserving resilience going forward. Number 1, we need an integrated approach to climate risk and energy transition. This is critical to securing sustainable, reliable, and affordable supplies of electricity. Number 2, we need deep expertise in how to deal with power systems, related cyber risk, how to reduce these, and maximize smart grid benefits. Number 3, time and location of generation will increasingly determine value, and regulations will need to be revised to match evolving economics. 4, changes in taxes and subsidies will need to increasingly value energy sustainability, and this will intensify reshaping of electricity systems, investment, and business models. Now, let me use these 2 last statements to make a bridge to our topic, to this morning's track. Electricity economics are steadily being transformed nationally and globally by pricing of damaging externalities such as greenhouse gas emissions and temporary public support to accelerate the introduction of cleaner, safer, and smarter technologies. That makes the past a poor guide for the future due to changes in environment, technology, and policy, which poses, of course, a challenge. But alignment of markets, regulation, and planning with trends in technology and global policy will reduce capital misallocation risk, raise investor confidence, and reduce financing cost. Let me also mention that economics of electricity supply are in a transition as well from variable to fixed costs, because renewable energy can eliminate exposure to volatile fuel costs. This shift is compounded by the flexibility of emerging advanced storage, demand response, and much more distributed deployment. In addition to change in regulation, this also means facilitating new value from ancillary services and demand response, and manage complexity by integrating system planning and market design. Finally, bottom line, whatever we want to do needs to make economic sense to those investing into it. So we obviously live in a very complex world, trying to tie all together these developments and imperatives, and I'm very glad that today we have experts here to talk with us about, for example, innovating renewable energy project finance, as Mr. Edward McCartan, Manager Director, Asia Green Tech, will explore with his panel later on at around 10 o'clock. And I'm also very happy to welcome Mr. Allard Nooy, Chief Executive Officer, InfraCo Asia Development, who will, right after I finish, will provide a keynote to us about stimulating greater foreign direct investment in the Philippines, before then leading his panel to discuss about investment opportunities in the Philippines and energy sector. Let me now close by briefly introducing Allard. It's a long CV. So, Allard joined InfraCo Asia mid-2013 and is responsible for InfraCo Asia's strategic transformation process, i.e. the development and implementation of its multi-developers and co-investment program, including a dedicated program for Myanmar. Allard has over 25 years of strategic executive leadership experience in the infrastructure sector, primarily in emerging markets. He has successfully led and acquired infrastructure, energy, and environmental companies throughout Asia. His key focus has been on the development and implementation of growth strategies, the creation of new assets, and the financing and execution of infrastructure projects. Allard, may I welcome you to the stage, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Matthias, and welcome everyone. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor for me to do the keynote address this morning prior to chairing a panel on financing challenges in the Philippines. I like to take you through an introduction of where we believe the gap in the renewable energy sector is across the region, but then specifically the Philippines, where the challenges and the opportunities lay. In order to kick this off, I would like to give you sort of a context where we are operating and where there is significant demand for infrastructure in Asia, specifically in the energy sector. Most of you would have seen this slide before. It was done back in 2010 when a number of multilateral agencies plus McKinsey worked on an investigation where the infrastructure gap is in Asia. There is significant demand for infrastructure in Asia, particularly in the energy sector. It's been identified that $8 trillion would be required and that was 5-6 years ago, in the next 10 years. So that was in the window of 2010 to 2020. About half of that is actually identified to be required in the energy sector, and that's both on the thermal side as well as in the renewable energy space. So the energy and transportation sector drive much of that demand, and within the energy sector, growth in the renewable energy space is expected to be the highest. If you look at Asia and a number of other emerging markets, in much of Asia, demand outstrips the financing. Despite the fact that the private sector investments is key to meeting this gap, and that institutional global investors have raised about $200 billion in funds globally to be put into infrastructure assets. They are, particularly on the institutional investors, the pension funds and what have you, they are unwilling to invest that in an early stage, high risk emerging market environment. They usually come in when a project is well structured, when a project has sort of reached financial close or is close to reach financial close, and then obviously, particularly pension funds, are very keen to get into operating assets where there is a proven cash flow. If you look at the Philippines in particular, they are sitting on the top of this slide. So the gap versus the actual infrastructure spent as percentage of the GDP is significant. So this is where foreign capital, despite the fact that the Philippines has got a very good balance sheet, for a better word, there is significant debt capital available in the market. There is still a gap when it comes to sort of equity, and particularly risk equity, to put that to work. The value of the bank deposits, bonds, and equity versus the GDP gap is also identified here, and you see that a number of other countries do sit in sort of the same quadrant as the Philippines are. Coming back to that $8 trillion which is required in the infrastructure space, a number of these projects are bankable, but the percentage is relatively low. And this is important. Identified is that 5 to 10% of that 8 trillion, and let's talk about the energy sector, about $4 trillion, about 5 to 10% of that is actually bankable. A significant percentage, 30 to 45% of demand is actually marginally bankable, and the rest is non-bankable projects. They're out there, but commercial lenders, and I'm not talking about the NDBs in this case, are unwilling basically to come in on a basis of a PF structure. And that's particularly true in the energy sector, which is obviously the $4 trillion which I referred to earlier. So why is it that there is a lack of bankable projects, and how can it be addressed? Developing infrastructure projects to international standards is the key to creating bankable projects. And that's true even when you talk to local lenders, despite the fact that there is significant depth in the debt market here in the Philippines. The amount of capital required for project development is somewhere between 2 and 10% of the total project value. The project development stage carries, obviously, particularly in the early stage, a very high risk for investors. Not enough players are addressing this particular issue, and this is actually where InfraCo Asia is mandated for. A very brief introduction. InfraCo Asia became operational in 2010. We're a commercially managed infrastructure development and infrastructure investment company. We're headquartered in Singapore. We're covering 12 countries across South Asia and Southeast Asia. And we aim to stimulate greater private sector investment in the infrastructure space. We fund early stage development. We take that early stage and high risk activities by taking an equity stake in projects. So it's purely equity which we put at risk prior to get to financial close. Projects need to be commercially viable because our role is basically to play where the private sector has either failed to play or is unwilling to play. And by the time we have put these development dollars at risk to de-risk a project, our key performance indicator is that at financial close, we attract private sector capital from the market, and that's a combination of both debt and equity. So that multiplier is an important target for us. We very much focus on risk identification and risk management throughout the development process and ultimately the implementation process. And we're also committed to tackling major institutional market obstacles hindering private participation in the infrastructure space. The way how we operate is that we've got basically 2 dedicated programs. We've got an outsourced developer services program where we have now 3 dedicated developers on board, 1 for Southeast Asia, 1 for South Asia, and 1 dedicated for Myanmar. We have also a co-development, co-investment program, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Under the outsourced developer services program, project origination, structuring, development, EPC management, and financial structuring is outsourced to the 3 dedicated developers, and some of them are actually in the room. I'll be happy to introduce you to the dedicated developer for Southeast Asia, a company called Infund Development. Elik Miller is here in the room. Approach him during the next coffee break if you wish. The Myanmar program, which was standard last year and has the team there has hit the ground running. They've got a very healthy pipeline on projects. It's being managed by a company called InfraCapital Myanmar, and the head of InfraCapital Myanmar, Janis, is also in the room. Approach him when you're interested to do things with us in Myanmar. And South Asia is being managed by a company called Equicap Asia, headquartered in New Delhi. The co-development program, which is managed by the internal management team, is actually working with individual developers who have hit a roadblock and can't take the project forward because usually lack of capital. So despite the fact that we are a commercially managed infrastructure development and investment company, we're actually funded by the public sector. We're funded by what is called PIDG, the Private Infrastructure Development Group, which was founded back in 2002 by a number of European donors who came to the conclusions that grants in aid in emerging Africa and emerging Asia had resulted in fantastic feasibility studies and fantastic reports by top-class consultants, but these reports were largely laying on shelves and the actual implementation hadn't happened. So this was an initiative whereby they said, look here, let's put equity to work. Let's let the private sector develop structure projects and then have returnable capital to our donors and to ultimately the taxpayers in those countries. The current donor shareholders are not just European anymore. The current donor shareholders do include the governments of Australia, the UK, Switzerland, Germany, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, and IFC. And there are currently 8 subsidiary companies underneath the PIDG. InfraCo Asia Investments and InfraCo Asia Development are 2 of those, and that's being managed by me. So coming back on our role in life. So we do very early stage, high risk development activities. We take them through a de-risking process and we work very closely with a number of consultants in order to assist us with that, including environmental impact assessments according to IFC standards, including value engineering, legal and tax advice, as well as financial advice. And then we take a project to financial close. Should there be an equity gap at financial close? We have a subsidiary company called InfraCo Asia Investments, which could plug in the gap at financial close as a sort of funder of last resort. We usually go to market at financial close once a project has been de-risked in order to attract private equity in the mix. Should that not be required, we stay in, we implement the project, and we've done that successfully across the region, get an asset ultimately into operation, and then exit subsequently once the asset is in operation. So in doing so, we fill a gap in the market. There are actually hardly any, there's hardly anybody else in that space where we play. The only exceptions are probably the IFC Infra Ventures, although they are limited to a 25% shareholding in projects, and we are not. We could take up to 100% shareholding if required. But we work very closely with IFC, both on the DevCo side as well as on the Infra Ventures side. And the recently established Global Infrastructure Facility, which is a World Bank supported by the Canadian government and the Australian government, is probably a similar facility. So our investment criteria do need to fulfill, apart from commercial viability, another 3 important aspects. One of them is additionality. So we play where the private sector has either failed to play or is unwilling to play. We need to look at development impact, and that's a combination between both social and economic impact. So creation of jobs is obviously an economic denominator. On the social impact, it's getting poorer people in Asia better access to better infrastructure. And we work in a balanced portfolio, smaller projects versus larger energy projects. We have recently made our first co-investments here in the Philippines, and we're very excited to take that project forward. This is with, we've partnered successfully now with Alter Energy, headquartered here in Manila, and we will be developing a pipeline of mini hydro projects in North Luzon. Total portfolio size currently, 6 projects in the pipeline, is about 26 megawatts. They're ranging from 3 to sort of 7 megawatt each. And we've come in with a convertible facility. So we've taken up 50% of the pre-financial close development capital through a convertible. The reason why we did this is that we're kept at 50% because the original developer, Alter Energy, will still champion the project and getting the project to financial close. We're there to guide, to support, and to co-fund. And at financial close, obviously, once we decide to convert, at a pre-agreed premium, we will need to attract further private capital from the market in order to comply with the regulations in country that we have not more than 40% interest in the venture given the rules around renewables in country. But again, a very exciting pipeline of mini hydros in North Luzon where we are providing support to Alter Energy. Let me turn to the energy sector in the Philippines. The energy mix in the Philippines is still heavily geared towards non-renewables. And this particular pie chart gives you an indication that some 29% of the energy generation is still coming out of coal, about 23% is coming out of oil, and that's mainly smaller diesel-driven assets, particularly on outlying islands. 18% in hydro, and then the rest in natural gas, geothermal, waste heat, and other renewables. Having said that, there is a commitment towards increasing the proportion of renewable energy, and that's being driven by, obviously, rules and regulations, which I believe the Philippines are actually ahead of a number of other ASEAN countries. They provide basically they set targets, they provide incentive schemes, and they provide caps in terms of getting feed-in tariffs for the different classes in the renewable energy mix. Feed-in tariffs, and that's both working for the solar, for the wind, and the hydro sector. It's basically a single buyer, fixed selling rates. There's still, obviously, USM as a potential off-taker, as well as PPAs, should you not be able to qualify for your FIT. FIT rates are basically designed to incentivize renewable energy into the mix. It was introduced back in 2012 by the Energy Regulation Commission, who was here yesterday. And per commission, electricity generated by renewable energy sources has a priority for grid connection, which is obviously providing a level of comfort to investors. It gives a priority of purchase, and it benefits from tariff to be paid over a fixed period of time. So all in all, various incentives are available for the renewable energy sector. Particularly the tax holidays are a major driver, and they're available to both renewable energy developer as well as the renewable energy commercialization sector. And there's also a VAT exemption on renewable energy. So that drives basically the further investments, partly drives further investment in the renewable energy sector. Several other key policies have been issued. One of them is that you must dispatch and priority dispatch of renewable energy resources in the Western market. So that's the wholesale electricity supplies market, mandating all distribution utilities to undergo competitive selection process in securing power supply arrangements, and commercial operations of the central scheduling and dispatch and energy of contracted reverse in the wholesale electricity supplies market. So there are a host of other initiatives in place and or planned. I hope that the next administration will continue to do so. My personal view is that the current statement, or the most recent statement of continuing actually with PPPs in country is encouraging of the incoming administration, but we also hope that the incentive schemes for renewable energy going forward will be maintained. The financing sector in the Philippines is pretty reliable. I mean, there's partly due to foreign deposits. There is quite a deep debt market in place. The fact of the matter is that you don't need to turn to foreign banks in order to get projects who are well structured to get them to financial close. The other supporting frameworks are there by the multilaterals, who, particularly on the private sector side, who would be able to support renewable energy sectors. The Philippines has also a relatively strong PPP framework. As I mentioned before, we're very encouraged by the fact that the incoming administration has continued to work in the PPP sector, and the PPP Center of Excellence, to my honest opinion, is a great example, and other ASEAN countries who take basically advantage of that out of that learning curve. Maybe 5, 6 years ago, they had a slow start to break down the barriers between the various different line ministries, but they have been able to bring projects to the to market. As you see here in the middle, the Philippines has got no red dots in this particular chart, and that's encouraging. There are good frameworks in place. There is a PPP center who is supportive of that, and going forward, we believe that will be going on. The Philippines has made one of the strongest commitments to renewable energy in Asia, and that's an encouraging aspect. 50 to 60% self-sufficiency through renewables, through feed-in tariffs for renewables with the various tax incentives, as I mentioned before. Wrapping up, there are still a couple of restrictions, however, in the renewable energy space in comparison to other countries in Asia. Renewable energy assets can only be kept, well, they are kept for foreign direct investors by the 40%, whereas a number of other countries have lifted those restrictions. And once you lift those restrictions, a further inflow of FDI would obviously be happening. These factors may contribute to a large number of smaller renewable energy deals, and this is also the reason why potentially larger PPP deals are not in the energy space, but more in the transportation space as far as the Philippines are concerned. There's room for more power projects in the PPP pipeline. And if you look at this, then it's very clear that the major deals have been in the transportation sector, and as well as in the social PPP infrastructure sector. On that note, I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and I'll be happy to take any questions if you have. Thank you.